Conveyance controls are BMPs that are going to move water from point A to point B through your project while preventing erosion or allowing the sediment that's in the water to fall out. The principle here is to keep clean water clean. The water that precipitates out of the air is relatively clean from a turbidity standpoint. How do you migrate that raindrop clean all the way through from when it comes in contact with your activity through to the discharge point where it leaves your site? Every time you put water into a pipe or into a ditch line, you are concentrating that flow. You're going to add velocity to it. So we have to often figure out how to take that velocity back out that we've created. You migrate the water through the system in a controlled way that the system doesn't become a contribution source to you, but you also need to consider at the end of your ditch line or the end of your culvert to create an outlet protection so it's going to reduce that velocity and not scour the downstream environment. So you're going to do things like riprap. You might use concrete cloth, or sod is oftentimes used as a vegetated strip as well. Different activities, different best management practices can be placed at the end of these systems to slow the velocity down so that they're not scouring the downstream environment. If the channel or ditch line has just recently been exposed and the vegetation's not established, you're going to need to use a channel lining BMP like a channel liner control measure where you're going to protect the shoulder, waiting for those shoulders to reestablish with vegetation. You might use a permanent installation like a TRM that's going to be left there in perpetuity, or you may use something like a sod or rock liner so you're not adding velocity to the sediment and sediment's not being transported or picked up by the channel itself in that flowing environment as you migrate the water down. So structural integrity of your ditch is very important as you're moving water through your property to the downstream environment. This is an example of skip ditching where we're leaving existing vegetation to be able to manage for erosion control. And then behind us, we're maintaining the ditch line, and those vegetated barriers are helping reduce erosion as it goes through the ditch. Now, to help slow the water down, we oftentimes install these things called check dams. Check dams are both temporary and permanent. There's a lot of different biodegradable ones that are left in place at the end of the project. You can use straw wattles, you can use compost socks, you could utilize coir logs or even wood chip socks that are out there. Those are going to be left in place as a check device and then biodegrade over time. Or you can use something that's going to be temporary check device. What we're going to talk about and show you here is spring berm or triangular silt dike, or maybe sandbags that you're going to put in place for a period of time, and then they can be taken out of the ditch after the project is done and to allow the vegetation to establish. The thing that's important about installing wattles, the frequency of the check dams within the slope. The steeper the slope, oftentimes the closer the wattles need to be. Without specification based on the steepness of slope, you can judge how close your wattles need to be together by looking at the downstream wattle, and as water cascades over the top of this, you want the top of this wattle to back the water up to the bottom of that wattle. So you want water coming over the top of the wattle, cascading into the water, and then being checked up by this dam again. The final consideration that you need to have for your conveyance is potentially the need for storage. We're talking about temporary storage here, and we're not talking about necessarily a huge amount of water when we're talking about these smaller projects. But you may need to have a place where you can reside the water for a period of time to allow gravity to take hold of the particles so that you can get clean water in your discharge. Storage BMP examples are things like sediment traps or small ponds, or even tanks that you can put out there. Some tanks are pop-up tanks, some are steel, lots of different types of storage devices that are out there to do a dewatering project. We can actually create a de-water pit out of sediment fence and discharge the water as well, but you have to have a footprint for all of these storage devices dedicated for storage on your facility. Storage devices allow gravity to take hold of the particles that are in the water, or you may actually push the water through a system using pumps, filters, and other pieces of equipment. You can add enhancements to these storage devices like weir walls or sediment curtains to get that sediment to drop out faster through the system so you get cleaner water off of your site earlier. And then of course, there is the potential for the need of treatment, especially if you're going to work on projects that are going through the winter, or you may have a contaminated soil on your site, or you're working in a sensitive area where water quality is important for health reasons or drinking water protection. Treatment becomes a necessity for your project, and you're going to need to plan for that early as part of your planning to get good design.